welcome everybody to first episode of Crush This Nitro Fueled. My name is Brad, the Monster Truck Canucker Shaw, and along with me, my new co-host for this awesome new adventure that we're doing through Crush This, Dalton Hastings. Dalton, how's it going today, buddy?
Dude, honestly, I gotta be totally honest. To think we were just BSing about the idea, and all of a sudden, you just simply told me it would be good to do a podcast about this. And honestly, my love for drag racing, I love monster trucks too, but I love drag racing a whole lot, and I just can't think of a greater partner to be doing this with. We both love drag racing, so I'm ready for this.
Oh, definitely. My first love before monster trucks was NHRA drag racing. And especially during the 1990s. The 1990s of NHRA, I feel, was the best kind of era. You had John Force just starting his domination in 1990, winning his first championship. You had, new drivers coming up. You had, some unfortunate mishaps in the 1990s. And we're going to cover all that. The thing with Crush This is, myself and Cheech, my partner, the co-owner of Crush This, Dan Agosh, we wanted to do more than just the original show. That show is going to be still happening. The Crush This, a Monster Truck podcast, is still around. Do not worry, fans. We're just introducing two new shows. This one, Crush This Nitro Fueled, and Crush This Kicking It Old School, which Dan is going to be heading up. We're wanting to do some other stuff with the brand, making Crush This more of a brand. So with this episode, we're going to be doing some event reviews of the 1990s, the era that me and Dalton know the best. Hopefully eventually have some guests if, it gets to that point with this, this podcast, if we, get some traction and stuff, those nitro cars need traction. So with this episode, we're going to be looking at, and thank you, Dalton, for coming up with some notes. But we're going to be looking at the 1990 Chief Auto Parts Winternationals from Pomona, California. So coming off of the 1989 season, a lot of stuff had changed. You had the let's see here. Let's look at these notes.
Well, obviously coming off of 1989, we had a major change from Funny Car over to Top Fuel with Kenny Bernstein, and ironically enough, he had just come off a 4-year winning streak of winning the Winston title, going over to Top Fuel. I mean, he pretty much said that either way, in 1989, it was his last year driving a Funny Car. He was going to go over to Top Fuel either way, but another major shocker was Don Perdome going back to a dragster, because if you remember way back when the Nitro cars first came about, Don Perdome actually drove a front-engine dragster.
Yeah, he drove the Greer Black Perdome car back in the early days, and he moved into Funny Car when that kind of was getting very popular in the 70s, with the Snake and Mongoose. And it was surprising to find out that Kenny Bernstein, being such a dominant force, him and Double A Dale Armstrong, who is from Alberta, might I add, where I'm from, they were basically the John Force and Austin Coyle of the 80s, dominating the Funny Car class. And then you, like you said, you add in Don Perdome going into Top Fuel. It kind of was a changing of the guard, I want to say. And, especially in 1989, the champions you had in that, and, Gary Ormsby in Top Fuel, Bruce Larson in Funny Car, Daryl Alderman, I believe, was the 89 champion, if I'm correct.
Actually, no, Bob Glidden was. Bob Glidden won I believe it was his 10th Pro Stock title, or his 9th, I'm not quite so sure. But either way, before we get into 1990, we have to obviously talk about the 1989 season. In 1989, we had a major up and down season with Gary Ormsby. He survived not one but 2 horrific wrecks. One out, I believe, in California, Pomona, California, where he flipped the car upside down, and then I believe it was either Brainerd.
It was Brainerd.
Yeah, it was
when
Brainerd.
He slammed almost like front end first into the guardrail.
Yep, two major crashes, and still walked away the Winston champion. And not to mention Bruce Larson for years, and a lot of monster truck fans are going to like this. he used to drive a funny car way back when called the USA 1 before he got a lot of major sponsorship from Century, which was, ironically enough, Joe Amato's old sponsor from when he drove his red Top Fuel car. Bruce Larson ended up winning 6 events to claim his first and only Winston title. But I believe that Bruce Larson considers it to be probably the best season he's ever had. And if memory stands correct, I believe Kenny Bernstein might have made a couple of finals, but I don't think he ever won anything in 1989.
I don't believe so. And the thing that Larson had the advantage of was partnering up with Tim Richards and Joe Amato. That was basically, in a way, a team car to that dragster. They kind of wanted to branch out and do the funny car thing. And oddly enough, Joe Amato did have a funny car. He did have a funny car back in the 70s or the 80s.
I believe it was the sorry to cut you off there, man. Sorry. I believe it was like the early 80s. He actually ran an alcohol car. He ran an alcohol car for quite a while and then just managed to go right up into the top fuel ranks, which honestly is a major step because usually a lot of people take Pat Austin, for example. He drove a alcohol funny car, and during the same events, he would hop into a top fuel car. But honestly, it really is a big adjustment because of Bruce Larson having not only Tim Richards, but also having Joe Amato as his teammate. That really did help him out in the long run. And in 1989, he definitely proved to everybody he could be a top player. And also, to prove that they're a top player, Bob Glidden, for not only capturing another Winston title, I believe he captured his 75th Pro Stock victory that year, proving that he can still go at an old age.
Oh, most definitely. And, you wouldn't have thought beginning of 1990 that record of, 9 to 10 championships, even, 75 wins would be broken. You wouldn't have thought that would happen, but it happens in the 90s and going into the early 2000s. Now, I'm looking at the notes here, and you put in, Don Perdome kind of had an early struggle getting used to the top fuel cars, having a blowover in Bakersfield, in testing.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be the first blowover that Don Perdome would have in his top fuel career.
Oh, God. If memory serves correctly, in 1990 alone, he wrecked 3 cars. And I believe his most famous would be, I know ahead of ourselves, but a lot of people do that anyway. 1990 in Montreal during a qualifying run.
Yep.
Car's going straight as an arrow, and all of a sudden the car just goes all the way up, and he blows it over and manages to have enough speed to not only have the car rolling over on its side, hits the guardrail, goes over the guardrail, flips over the guardrail, and lands onto the grass ground while going downhill.
He didn't have a lot of luck that year, and even, Kenny Bernstein didn't have a lot of luck getting used to the top fuels, because a lot of people might think, oh, it's the same kind of motor. It is technically, but different, wheelbases, how you drive them is completely different. And who knew the beginning of the 1990 season that 2 years later, Kenny Bernstein would set the world on fire? But we'll get to that. So,
oh yeah, definitely.
So beginning of the 1990 season, you had a lot of expectations. Like I said, you had the changing of the guard and funny car. Bruce Larson, the brand new champion. John Force was starting to kind of gain a lot of momentum coming into that season. He had Austin Coyle, tuning the wrenches. That team was going to become a powerhouse that year. You had the pro stock field at that time was one of the deepest that, I think ever was.
Oh, no, definitely. Like, in 1990, I want to say from at least 1990 to probably 1993, you had some of the best pro stock guys out there. You had Warren Johnson, Jerry Ekman, Bruce Allen, Daryl Alderman, I'm sorry, a young rookie. I know we're getting ahead of ourselves here. A young rookie by the name of Scott Jeffreyon would make his appearance, I believe, in 1991. And then further along down the field, you had Warren's son Kurt, who was originally wrenching on a couple of other Pro Stock cars before he ended up getting his seat. And as the years kept on going by, you had all this amazing talent that just filled up the Pro Stock gaps. And I still think to this very day, one of the best Pro Stock battles would probably have to be the Johnson versus Jeffrey-On battle.
Yes.
Honestly, I believe it was either Houston or Atlanta of 1994. They had that staging duel, and Buster Couch threw a fit.
It was Slick 50 Nationals, Houston Raceway Park, 1994. I remember watching it live as a little kid, and like I didn't like the Dodge Boys. I was Warren and Kurt Johnson fan through and through. I didn't like Darrell Alderman or Scott Jeffrey-On. But, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So let's kind of go into the event here. So, like I said, 1990, it's the new era. A lot of things are going to happen in the 90s, and throughout the episodes, we'll kind of get to that. So we'll go right into Top Fuel. You had Gene Snow as your number one qualifier, and it's going to be let's see here, number one qualifier at 4.98 seconds with a speed of 268.
Real quickly here, in today's drag racing, I know we run 1,000 feet now, but if we were to see a 498 at 1,000 feet at 268, would anybody even make it into the field today?
No. Oh, heck no. Heck no. So you had, so I'm just looking at the notes here. So who, just trying to read the notes here.
If you're wondering about, because Gene Snow did qualify number one, Don Perdome easily got by round number one. I didn't find out who he faced off against, but Kenny Bernstein still trying to figure out the Top Fuel car, because he goes up against Chris Karamessini's a legend in the history of drag racing.
The Golden Greek?
Yep, exactly. But ends up destroying the block, and they have to build up a whole new power plant to get him ready for round two. And then we kick off with, we should say this first, this is an NBC broadcast, because during this time, a lot of television people were seeing different events that took place with the NHRA. During this particular point in time, the NHRA would do shows on NBC, TNN when it was called the American Sports Cavalcade, and ESPN Speed World. And to kick us off, we are on NBC with Fred Rogan doing the commentary, Steve Evans at the track end interviewing all the drivers, and Big Daddy Don Garlett's on the starting line to get all the crew chiefs and get their thoughts on everything. And we kick off with round two with Laurie Johns and Don Perdome.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about Laurie Johns because, in that era, she was a thorn in a lot of people's side. She, one of the, besides, Shirley Muldowney, she was one of the other female top field pilots that I knew about when I was growing up. And there's the one saying that Steve Evans always had with her and Kenny Bernstein, that Bernstein couldn't beat a blonde. And, it kind of, goes along even with Don Perdome, because she goes up against Don Perdome and Laurie Johns wins. But due to, Don Perdome having some issues, losing the blower belt and, losing some cylinders. So, Laurie Johns was making a name for herself at a very young age and a very, time where a lot of female top field pilots didn't exist.
If I was only around in 1990, I would say Laurie Johns is my absolute crush. Like, just looking at the footage of her, like, I know, she still looks beautiful today, but oh my God, back in 1990, she was a bombshell. Yeah, Laurie ends up doing really well. It's such a shame, though, that with Snake. It's because, he's still getting used to everything, and he ends up saying in an interview with Steve Evans later on that he was very, very disappointed with the fact that he didn't really do well throughout the whole entire weekend, but he was glad on how the car was able to keep itself up. But Steve Evans, talking about how Laurie Johns was making her way through, Lori was definitely an up-and-comer. I believe her very first race was 1988 or 87. She still ran the same sponsor as she did in this event. She ran for Jolly Rancher. And she was going up there in a time when Shirley was still competing, but it wasn't like the Shirley Muldowney of old. It was not like the Shirley Muldowney of old. And Lucille Lee, if memory serves correctly, at this particular time, she wasn't with us anymore. I believe she had passed away by this time.
I'm not 100% sure, but I'll try to find that out. It's interesting, with this era, and like we're going on to the next race here. You got Gary Ormsby, the defending champion, against Shirley Cha-Cha Muldowney. And the thing with Shirley is at this time she's driving for Larry Minor, who would go on to have the McDonald's paint scheme, I believe, the next year. But she goes from the pink scheme that she's well known for to the Otter Pops car, which is blue. And Shirley hasn't been really spectacular in after the Top Fuel has changed to what it was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I don't think Shirley kind of ever raced. She didn't have that good of success in the 90s, I don't believe.
Nah, she really didn't. I love Shirley Muldowney. I think she's one of the all-time greatest, but during the time in the 90s, she really didn't have all that much luck. I think it was because of all the new equipment that kept going on, and also, don't forget, by 1988 and 1989, a lot of the dragsters were changing. And if you notice, during this particular race at least, or this particular year, a lot of the dragsters are running the smaller wheels and the updated chassis frames compared to what Shirley ran way back when. So a lot of equipment's changing, but she does say in her interview with Steve Evans that she feels like that all the big stars are in Top Fuel right now, and that Top Fuel racing is going to be the greatest it's ever been. And boy, was she right.
Well, so going on to the next race here, and I just want to let you know, fans, we're kind of going off the cuff with this every now and then. We're still trying to get how we're the podcast is, but so the next race, you got the Battle of the Beers, and the Battle of the Beers would go on with different sponsors, different drivers throughout the years. And so you got Daryl Gwynn versus Kenny Bernstein, which the year previous to this, Daryl Gwynn was racing a Budweiser car. Because back then, Daryl Gwynn and Kenny Bernstein kind of worked together and kind of helped Daryl with some, technical advice with him and Dale Armstrong. Well, when Kenny decided to move to Top Fuel, Daryl lost the sponsorship, but he gets Coors Extra Gold, I believe, which iconic scheme, one of my favorite schemes of all time. And, this battle between the beer cars would go on for years with Coors and Miller, and it was just one of those kind of feuds you'd have throughout the years. And so Dalton, tell us what happens in this race.
Well, honestly, this race though, for Kenny Bernstein, it was his second ever round race inside of a dragster. He did get the whole shot advantage, but ended up losing cylinders. But somehow still manages to beat Daryl Gwynn. Bernstein ends up running a 5.019 at 276. Gwynn runs faster at a 5.13 at 279, but still loses. We do, however, find out that later on that Bernstein blew an oil line of some sort, and there's all kinds of oil all over the front of the engine, which we ended up finding out later on that it was either a small spark plug near the oil tank or just some sort of wire that was right near the oil, and it just went all over the block. And according to Big Daddy Don Garlitz, he said that the motor was fine, but still could use a little bit of work.
Well, I want to quickly mention about the announcers at this time. You had Steve Evans, who I feel like through all kinds of motorsports, monster trucks, anything, Steve Evans is the best.
Nobody can top him.
Unfortunately, he passed away quite a few years ago. but he was the voice of my childhood. People say, oh no, Gary Lee or Army Armstrong is the voice of my childhood, and they can argue that, but I feel like nobody had a hold on what Steve Evans could do, especially in the NHRA.
Oh, no, me neither. I mean, like, I've seen Steve Evans do other things like Supercross, monster trucks, tractor pulling, swamp buggy racing. Whatever he does, he acknowledges the will to learn new things. And he does it with such great enthusiasm that I think the announcers today, no offense to any of the announcers in today's world, whether it's NASCAR, Monster Jam, monster trucks, or anything like that, they don't have the enthusiasm that Steve Evans had. He shows charisma. He shows great energy whenever he's interviewing someone. Like, just by the way he talks, you can tell that Steve Evans wants to make this the best interview he's ever done. And I feel like every interview he ever did, he did it with just such amazement. I don't think it can be topped.
Nope. And so with that, we're going to the final race of round 2. You got Gene Snow versus Dick LaHaye, two old veterans that, are from they raced in the 70s. These guys know, how to run well. And, with this, but, this race kind of didn't go Gene Snow's way, which he explodes a supercharger as LaHaye goes past him with the win, advancing to the semifinals. The supercharger is gone from the race car. Gene says it's the worst explosion he ever had. Gene Snow, he'd go on to success in IHRA at times, and was always a competitor, but especially in this era, Dick LaHaye running, having the Miller sponsorship, that car was very, very, competitive, especially with his daughter Kim doing in the wrenches.
I was very glad to see Dick LaHaye advance into this. Like, I mean, like, I know we're talking about a race that's almost 30 years old. I love Gene Snow, but I felt like that the LaHayes were just always a lot more dominant. I mean, they won the 1987 Winston title from a very, very tough battle with Joe Amato that year. Kim LaHaye was such a great crew chief at that time. She knew how to wrench on Dick's car. She knew how to do this. She knew how to do that. And she did it amazingly, to the fact that no matter what problem Dick had, Kim was right there to fix it, and they had the crew on top of everything. And you were right. Dick LaHaye moves on. And if you go back and watch that footage of the supercharger explosion, it is a big concussion for 1990. I mean, any bit of a nitro engine exploding like that because of too much fuel in one cylinder, just watch out, because it is going to explode like nothing.
Well, like, nitromethane is one of the most explosive fuels in racing. I remember watching, I believe it was Scott Weiss's car at one of the U.S. Nationals, and they were, turning the motor over with the wrench, and it's just there was some nitro in one cylinder. It compressed, went kaboom, and, it's very dangerous. And, it's back in that day, they were running, I believe, like almost 100% nitro. And now with today, they're running a lot less nitro. And it's just with safety, and I just still think the sounds and stuff of the 1990s were a lot better than it is today.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Like, I just have to say this comment because you said it perfectly. The cars from the 1990s sounded so perfect. And yes, during this particular time, they were running 90% nitromethane. In 2000, they switched it to, I believe, 75% nitro or something around that area. But even still, during this particular time, 90% nitro in the tank. You had 90 minutes to repair your car after the whole round was done, or after your car went to the finish line. During this particular time, everything just felt so perfect. Yeah, we had a lot of oil downs and a lot of engine explosions during here, but I just felt like that everything in the 90s felt much better than what we see today. Call me a mark for everything that goes on in the 90s, but everything felt so much better back then than what we have now.
All right, so let's move on to the factory hot rods, the Pro Stalkers. One of the most exciting classes, I feel like, even though a lot of people give them flack, they're gasoline burning engines, running like 1,000 something horsepower, but I feel like Pro Stock's one of the most exciting classes no matter what, even today with the fuel injected.
It doesn't get the recognition that it should deserve. I mean, I'll admit I love the fuel cars, but if I like watching like a lot of drama occur on the racetrack, if I love watching a great high intense race, I go with Pro Stock. And boy, did we kick off Pro Stock in quite a way here. For some reason on the NBC broadcast, they went straight to the semifinals, but we see a little bit of a highlight clip. Rich Marino, in qualifying, he gets a little bit loose over on one end of the racetrack, going over to the other end, crossing the center line. He's already disqualified, but the worst is yet to come. He ends up rolling the car over 4 times and manages to bring the car back on all 4 wheels. Man, what a wreck.
And then you go into, you said they skip, all the way up into the semifinals. So we go to the semifinal one. You got Warren Johnson versus Bruce Allen. And, these guys battle it out for years. Warren Johnson is, undoubtedly, known as the professor of Pro Stock. I got to meet him in Bristol in 2005, and he's one of my all-time favorites. And Bruce Allen, like, you're thinking Rear Morrison, when you think of Bruce Allen. He was the one of the other powerhouses, a multi-time champion in his own right. So Warren Johnson, gets off the line, a lot better than Bruce Allen, but Bruce Allen with that Rear Morrison horsepower catches up to him, with his 734 at 188, knocking out Warren Johnson. And, throughout the years, Warren Johnson would become that powerhouse in the 90s.
Just honestly, Warren Johnson, within these next couple of years, I know for a fact that I know for a fact that you hate it when I say this year, but 1992 is the year of Johnson, and once we get into 1992, which I know for a fact you're not going to like, but
92.
I have to say this, 1992 is my all-time favorite year of drag racing. A lot of changes were happening that year, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But at this particular time, Warren Johnson's still trying to get there. In 1989, he finished 4th in the championship, so he's getting to the point where the professor is going to take charge of the class and say, "This is my trophy, and I am going to take charge of everything that goes on down in the racetrack."
I'm not looking forward to talking about 92. Oh, that still hurts me to this day.
I'll tell you what. We'll go over everything of 92 except for that one particular race in Dallas.
Oh, that still breaks my heart being a John Force fan.
However, we're going to get back on track here because the next race, I love Eddie Hill. I think Eddie Hill is one of the all-time greatest Top Fuel guys, but the real Pennzoil guy that I've always known, Jerry Ekman. Jerry Ekman versus Darrell Alderman, but Alderman, coming into the semifinal race against Ekman, he knocked out the defending champion Bob Glidden in round number 2. So Alderman has a lot to show for to prove that he's not ready to be messed with in 1990. But unfortunately, during this particular race, Jerry Ekman got off the line very, very well. Alderman still could not catch him. Ekman wins with a 730, and at the same speed, too, of 188.
So it seems like at that time, at this race, Ekman and Allen were very, matched, and going into the, final round, Jerry Ekman with the quicker time has lane choice. And I will, you said that, you think Jerry Ekman's the pencil guy. In my mind, it's Eddie Hill. Eddie the Thrill Hill, man.
Well, here's the thing, though, because Eddie Hill didn't get Pennzoil until 1992. He ran the Super Shop design for at least a couple of years, and then in 1992, he became all Pennzoil.
But he did have Pennzoil on the Super Shop scheme as well.
I will admit that. Yes, he did. But I'm just saying that I've always seen Jerry Ekman as the Pennzoil guy. I got nothing against Eddie Hill, 93 world champion in Top Fuel, but I've always considered Jerry Eckman as Mr. Pennzoil.
Well, moving on from that, we're going to my favorite class of all
Oh,
time.
mine too. Mine
The
too.
fabulous floppers, the plastic fantastics, the funny car class. And, John Force, who is my childhood hero, he's still my hero to this day. One of the most decorated racers in motorsports. Suck it, Jimmy Johnson. You can suck it. John Force is the man. Nobody can hold a candle to him.
Does that go with Dale Earnhardt too?
Yep. John Force is the real Intimidator. I don't know. People are going to hate me because of that, but, John Force, I don't know. Him and Dale Earnhardt are, two of the most polarizing personalities in auto racing.
Yeah, well, think of it this way. Dale Earnhardt definitely brought NASCAR to the mainstream because a lot of people considered NASCAR being a Southern-based sport that they'll never reach high popularity, but it wasn't until Dale Earnhardt came in, made everything just explode to the top, and then a lot of people knew that Dale Earnhardt was a top guy to be messed with because no one wanted to mess with the Intimidator. And then I really feel like that this particular year, right here, for not only both Dale Earnhardt, but for John Force himself, that this was the year that people realized, okay, John isn't a guy to mess with because, yes, he got his first national event win in 1987 against Ed McCulloch. Yes, he won about 4 events in 1988, and yes, he won a couple events in 89. But this particular year, in 1990, everybody can look it up. Everybody can look it up about how John Force was. This was the beginning of what you called the terror that was Force.
Well, you got to think, Force had been doing this since the 70s. He'd been putting his dues in. He traveled to Australia to race. He's one of the best success stories in modern day drag racing. And but with this event, he gets off to a rough start in his 1990 campaign, which he's eliminated by KC Hollywood Spurlock. Now,
honestly, if I had to ever pick one of the most underrated funny car drivers out there, like one that never gets looked at, KC takes one of the spots because KC, he might have only won a couple of events, but this is a great way to say I am here to show I am a real person to be messed with in 1990, or better yet, any part of the funny car division. Qualifies number 16, knocks out John Force in round 1.
And it's Casey's first ever race, I believe, with this race.
It is. His very first round race inside of a Fuel Funny car beats John Force, round number 1. If this was a Hollywood movie, you cannot write a better script.
And, KC would go on to, be a very successful racer in the Fruit of the Loom Dodge in the 1990s. And, one of the most, kind of exciting personalities in NHRA Winston drag racing. We had a little bit of, crappiness happen in, round 1. Art Hindy has a parachute failure, goes into the sand trap, and that kind of stuff really wouldn't happen today with all the automatic shutoffs that they have in the modern day funny cars.
I think the best thing, though, like not necessarily best for Art Hindy, but one of the best things that ever happened is they show a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. They take the funny car headers off of Art Hindy's car, they tilt them upwards, and you see a crap load of sand come out of the headers. Like so much sand got into the headers. I am so surprised that all that sand got inside there. And not to mention, Art Hindy, like, he would work for non-stop just to get that car ready. And, well, we will say later on, but he does end up coming back.
Oh, he does.
He does end up coming back.
The next race you got is Ed the Ace McCullough, what a legend in the sport, versus Glenn Micras in the Joe Pisano car. And, that Pisano car has had a lot of great drivers in it. That car is very legendary, especially in that era. But Ed Diaz-McCulloch gets past him with a 538. In the interview, Ace says that the car got loose as it went down the track. Probably got out of the groove a little bit. Ed Diaz-McCulloch, another one of those icons in the sport, definitely is going to be a thorn in John Force's side. Always was, a contender to win championships. I believe he did win a championship at one point. I don't know the exact year.
I don't think he ever did, because I was just about to say Ed McCulloch, one of the greatest guys to never win a championship. Let me. I'm actually on the championship list right now. No, he didn't.
Oh wow! So
he never won a title. That is I give all the respect to Ed McCulloch. He held the record for most wins at the U.S. Nationals. One of the all-time greatest funny car drivers out there. But I am going to say, to this day, at the time of this recording, Ed McCulloch, one of the greatest guys to never win a funny car title.
Well, it's a shame because, he always had the best equipment running for Larry Minor. There's a lot of times that he should have won it, but he just never did. And, he had one of the best crew chiefs at the time, I believe another Canadian, Bernie Federley, who, would go on to have a lot of success with John Force and Austin Coyle later in the 1990s. But, man, it's just a shame that, a driver of his caliber never kind of got the big one.
Nah, like, Ed would... I am so sorry. I had a major brain fart there. Were you talking about Scott Coletta or Ed McCulloch?
Ed McCulloch.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had like a major brain fart there. No, Ed was no doubt one of the greatest racers out there. I just feel like that it's a lot like this in any form of racing. You do well or you do bad at some point during the year, and then as the year goes on, your luck runs out, or your luck becomes better as the season's going on. I feel like that's what happened to Ed, but I mean, who knows? I still feel like, because he's got a lot to be happy for. Winning the U.S. Nationals, winning a whole bunch of other events, going from funny car to Top Fuel. Ed has pretty much done it all. I think that with everything that he has done, he doesn't need a title. I feel like that Ed McCulloch has done so much better just on his track record. He doesn't need a world title to say, I did this and I can complete my resume.
Hey, and we wouldn't see the last of Ed McCulloch, especially in the 1990s. And moving on to the next race, we have the late, great Scott Coletta, one of my favorite racers of all time, versus the reigning NHRA Winston champion, Bruce Larson. And, you put in the notes here that Larson won 6 events in 1989 to claim the title. And that was, domination, especially with how he was running that year.
Think about this. A lot of the guys now that, because we have the countdown now, and it's a lot like the playoffs in NASCAR. You just win one event, or you win one or more events, you automatically get qualified for the countdown or the playoffs. And then when the playoffs come about, you have to stay consistent throughout the whole thing. Otherwise, you're gone. This is why I feel like that they shouldn't this is why they shouldn't have gotten rid of the old point system. I understand that you do not want to capture a championship late, early in the season. Example, John Force in 96 captured it in early September when there were still 2 months left of racing. I understand that, but this is why it's good to keep it that way, because it goes to show you're either in it to win it, or you're just only doing it for, I don't want to say the money, but it's you're only doing it just to get yourself out there.
Well, with this race, Bruce Larson gets past Scott Coletta. Bruce Larson this season has a brand new car, runs a 531, and he's stoked on running a 531. Then you got R.C. Sherman, this is second round, versus Casey Spurlock, Giant Slayer, taking out John Force. R.C. Sherman, another great runner in the Ray Bestis car. Casey Spurlock gets past RC Sherman, the 537 to 263 to advance to the semifinals. And then you got Art Hendy coming back.
Oh my God, the Cinderella story keeps going.
Versus Dale Pulte, one of my favorite racers of all time, running a 5-year-old car. He won the Winternationals in 1988. Ran I believe it was the Miller Warrior back in the day. And Dale Pulte advances with the 537 on a whole shot win. So semifinals turn out to be Dale Pulte versus Ed Diaz McCullough. Pulte has lane choice, and Bruce Larson versus Casey Spurlock, with Bruce Larson has the lane choice. And Dalton, take us into the Top Fuel semifinals.
Oh, man. We kick it off right here with the 1989 World Champion and the 1987 World Champion. We have Gary Ormsby, who won the title the previous year in 89, versus Dick LaHaye in 1987. Ormsby does... I love it when people do deep stages, but at this particular one, I did not like it. Because not only does Ormsby deep stage, it costs him as LaHaye just goes right by him, gets the whole shot, while the other guy has a deep stage. The guy has the top light out. LaHaye manages to get a whole shot and goes by him, advances with the 503 at 272. Man, do these times get much quicker as the years go on. And then, as what you said at the beginning of the show, Kenny Bernstein and females. Laurie Johns versus Kenny Bernstein. This is Bernstein's third overall round race inside of a Top Fuel car. Bernstein has the car ready to stage, so does Laurie. Everything's all set to go. And then, out of nowhere, Bernstein red lights. But the worst is yet to come. He gets the car into a major wheel stand, causing some short damage to the front end of the car. Laurie Johns moves into her first final with a 522 at only 222 miles an hour. So then, at the far end of the track, because like I said with Steve Evans, he's always there to get the word out, pretty much asks Laurie, what did it feel like from your end? Laurie says that Kenny scared her a little bit when she saw the red light and the car going up. And originally, she thought he was hurt. That's why she kind of toned it down for a little bit. But also, the reason why her car slowed down a little bit was because she lost the blower belt, hence why it ran a 522 compared to Dick LaHaye's 503. So for our final round here, we have Laurie Johns, the beautiful blonde from Texas, going against Dick LaHaye, the former Winston champion. Dick LaHaye has got the lane choice. And now, I'm pretty sure you want to kick this off here. The Funny Car semifinals, and what a good way to kick it off.
Well, you got the Hollywood story, Casey Hollywood Spurlock versus Bruce Larson, the defending Winston champion. Casey just dominating this race, kind of coming from behind. He even in an interview, his family's all sprint car racers from Tennessee. He wanted to go the different route, be a nitro racer, and he gets by Bruce Larson. This is his third ever pass and third ever round ever. But due to Larson smoking the tires and almost going over the center line, Spurlock advanced with a 539 to 276. And, like you said, Steve Evans always getting that word in with whoever wins, says he's extremely happy he's in the final round and he's ready for it. But he's wanting to work on his reaction times a little bit. He's not where he wants to be.
It's so funny. You say you're ready for the final round. You're getting ready for this. You're so pumped up, but I got to work on my reaction. I got to work on my reaction time.
Well, like when you're going up against guys that have been doing this for a long time, you want to be good. And with the next race, the other semifinal, you got Dale Pulte in a 5-year-old car versus Ed the Ace McCullough. And this two old veterans been doing this a long time. Ed McCullough gets the whole shot as Dale Pulte smokes the tires. But right afterwards, Ed the Ace smokes the tires going down the strip, but he recovers, pedals it, gets not a good time though with a 589 at 236, and Casey Spurlock, the Cinderella story, gets the lane choice for the finals. And it's kind of the old guard versus the new guard, especially in this race.
Oh, definitely, because you see, I've always enjoyed rookies coming in. Example, Jeff Gordon in 1993, his first full season, never won a race, but he was up there with the likes of Jeff Gordon, Alan Kowicki before he passed away, Davey Allison before he passed away, Ernie Irvin. He was up there with all those guys, and he proved he could go. Casey doing the exact same thing here.
So you're saying Jeff Gordon was racing with Jeff Gordon then?
Jeff Gordon, before he became what he is today, before he got his very first win in 1994, I feel like that Casey Spurlock was a lot like Jeff Gordon before the final round, knowing he could keep up with all the big guys, and he could prove that he's here to stay.
I'm just messing with you because you said Jeff Gordon was up there with the likes of Jeff Gordon, and I think you meant to say Dale Earnhardt.
I honest to God, like, sorry folks, like literally, it is hot as hell inside my room right now. I got my fan on here. I don't know if you can hear like the little wind in the background, but I got my fan on here. I got my window open. I got like a bunch of stuff here just so I can get everything prepared. And I always try, and I will admit I'm a little bit nervous doing this. I've never really done a podcast before, but I'm just trying my best to get all this stuff out because right before we were about to do this, Brad tells me, watch the Winternationals and try to come up with as many notes as you can. So I'm like, okay, what can I do here? What can I do here? And every single thing that happened within a matter of like, I would say 15 seconds, I would pause the video and type down a couple of notes. I managed to get 4 pages of notes.
Hey, and they're coming in handy, and you're doing a great job at this, man. And things will get better as we go along with it. And speaking as going along with it, we are to the final rounds of the 1990 Chief Auto Parts Winternationals. And Dalton, take us into the Pro Stock Finals.
Well, you could say that the Pro Stock Finals had a little bit of tragedy to it, as it's Jerry Ekman versus Bruce Allen. And Steve Evans mentions that right before the racing had even began during the Winternationals that very day, Ekman's car owner, Bill Orndorff, had a very good friend, Jimmy Watson, who I believe was Bill's wife's brother, I want to say. I believe it was his wife's brother that passed away, and Ekman said right before he wanted to win this for Bill. I can't even imagine what Jerry Ekman was going through at that particular time. I mean, just the fact of having one of your close fans pass away right before the racing even begins, boy, that's got to add some pressure.
It probably did.
Oh, definitely. But the cars go off the line. Ekman has to steer a little bit. You can even see it, too. Ekman steering away as he's shifting those gears. Because keep in mind, you have one hand for shifting and one hand for steering. Still manages to beat Bruce Allen with the same ET of 733 and the same speed of 188 miles an hour. I am going to try my best to do this, but I believe Jerry Ekman beat Bruce Allen by 1/100,000th of a second. Of a 7.339 to a 7.338 beating a 7.339. Ekman says he dedicates his victory to Jimmy, and that he said he saw Bruce going all the way down the straightaway, and once when he got to the finish line, he said, I kind of figured I won, but I would not be surprised if I didn't get the victory. He said that also it's one of the greatest races he's ever done.
Well, coming up at the Pro Stock Finals, we go into the Funny Car Finals. Ed the Ace McCullough, icon, legend, veteran of the sport, versus, in his first ever race, in his first ever final round appearance, KC Hollywood Spurlock. You know, we go into it, the cars do their long smoky burnouts and back into the lights. And then we go to a little cutaway with Steve Evans asking KC why he wants to go funny car racing. And like I said earlier, Casey said something like he's always wanted to do all his life, and instead of sprint car racing, he wanted to try nitro funny cars. Thanks his family for all the support without a major sponsor, which he doesn't have it. He doesn't have any big sponsor. He has Adidas kind of as like a partner or whatever on the car. You know, a few years later he'd have Fruit on the Loom. But cars go off the line, and Ace smokes the tires. Too much power, too much clutch, and Casey does the unimaginable and wins the Winternational in his first ever race. It's crazy because that wouldn't happen today with how competitive the Nitro Funny Car class is. But back in the day, KC had Ronnie Swearingen, who's another great tuner. So you had Bernie Federley versus Ronnie Swearingen, the battle of the tuners, and the little team that could, does it.
And honestly, I will admit, I was born in 1995. I wasn't around when this aired, but being a 23-year-old, watching this race again, I know who's going to win, but it's like watching that race, I'm saying to myself, come on, KC, come on, KC. And every time, I always love it when I see someone that no one doesn't know about wins a big race. It goes for guys like AJ Allmendinger for winning, I believe it was Watkins Glen a couple of years ago. It goes for Jamie McMurray when he filled in for Sterling Marlin back in 2002. Darrell Russell, the late Darrell Russell, in his very first NHRA event in 2001, wins the Winternationals. And this right here, Casey Spurlock doing the unimaginable, I want to say this is either the very first time or this is probably the second or third time that a rookie coming into the very first event of the year wins the first race of the year. I want to say this is one of the first times that it happened. I am not quite so sure, though.
Well, coming off of that, we got an exciting final round of Top Fuel Funny Cars, or Top Fuel Dragsters, sorry. And Dalton, take us into Laurie Johns versus Dick LaHaye.
Laurie Johns versus Dick LaHaye. Laurie the Texan, Dick LaHaye, the former champion. Laurie has an opportunity to become the third woman ever to win a Top Fuel race. Keep in mind, this is 1990. 2 women had only won a Top Fuel race at this particular point. Shirley Muldowney won 17 times, and then a lovely lady in 1982 by the name of Lucille Lee won against Shirley Muldowney. We then go to a little interview. Steve Evans interviews Laurie Johns' mother. I think her name's Jocelyn, I believe. I didn't get her name down. But she said she's very excited that Lauren's in the finals, but she's also really nervous because she thinks that an accident might happen, that the chutes might not come out, but she really hopes she wins. We get ready. The engines are idling. The car is staged. Laurie, deep stages. I love the deep stages. For some reason, I prefer the deep stages over everything that these guys do in drag racing. Laurie gets the whole shot. Laurie gets the whole shot. They're going down the line. LaHaye is catching up as much as he can. LaHaye catches up right at the last second. But Laurie crosses the line first. Laurie Johns wins the 1990 Chief Auto Parts Winternationals. And you cut right to Laurie Johns' mom doing a little dance up and down the... doing a little dance up and down at the start of the race. The crowd is going nuts to the fact that Laurie Johns beat not only a former Winston champion, but a Top Fuel legend. And for the first time in her career, she takes over the points lead. Steve Evans goes right to her. Laurie says she never thought this would happen to her in all the years she'd ever been racing. But then she says a very comical quote here. She said that her father has always given her crap about her reaction time. And she says that not only will my dad be happy that I won, but I'm pretty sure he'll be very happy the fact that I got a good reaction time. I got a slow reaction time, and I still won.
Well, hey, she had the power that day, you know, and you were mentioning about deep staging, like, you can easily red light and screw up if you deep stage, like, it'll get you. but she just was on a rail that day, and it just shows, like, especially at the beginning of the 1990s, that hey, things were changing. You had two first time winners, and one rookie who wins his first race in Casey Spurlock.
You can't get better than that.
No, yeah, and in the 90s, we're just going to get better from there.
Oh my God! And to think, this is only the first race, and during this particular time, they only ran, I believe, 17 races, and one of them was a non-point paying race. It was just for money and such. So yeah, if you're thinking about it, 17 races on this season. They had a lot of downtime in between. Now it's like you go to Pomona, you have about 2 weeks off, then you have to go over to Phoenix, you go straight over to Houston the next week, and then it goes on from there. Here, you had about 2 to 3 weeks off to do your testing and everything else. You go to Phoenix, and then about another 2 weeks off, then you go over to Houston, then you go straight over to Gainesville. During this particular time, they had a lot of free time on their hands to get everything settled with their cars. So within the next upcoming few weeks, a lot of teams did a lot of adjustments. A lot of them were bad, but a lot of them were good.
And like during this time, a lot of the guys would do match races, to still kind of get their seat time. And John Force, very well known match racer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you watch any old broadcast, John Force will say all he does is match race whenever he has a weekend off. He doesn't do it for the money. He only does it for more seat time inside the car. Like, any fan back then, whenever they went to, like, let's say Norwalk, Ohio, for their Night of Thrill show, they would bring a lot of the old NHRA guys to the shows. And also, don't forget, too, I know he did them back in the 80s, but I believe at this time, too, John Force was still running IHRA.
I believe so. I believe he ran in 88, but I think from this point on, he was strictly just NHRA.
But that's just an amazing fact to think about. John Force, the head guy of Funny Car, the head of NHRA, doing IHRA way back when.
Well, IHRA had a lot of different tracks, and they ran Nitro Funny Cars, but for a long time, they just had Nitro Dragsters up until, I believe, I'm going to say like 03, 04, and that's when they started adding, they had guys like Cruz Pedregon come in, Tony Pedregon, Tim Wilkerson. They had those guys coming in. But,
wait till we get to 96 and we talk about Tony Pedregon.
Wait till we get about 92 so we can talk about Cruz.
Honestly, I've already started preparing for 92. And honestly, I'm not going to say that one race. I haven't gotten that far yet, but I've gotten up to Cruz's first win. So it's just going to keep going from there.
Well, I'll say this about the 90s, and this is a quote. I forget which race. I know it was one of the Gator Nationals. This is a quote from John Force, and I'll say this. I think we're in the points lead, and the nightmare continues, kiddies.
That was from Gainesville '94. I remember that quote to be exact.
Yep.
Because honestly, John Force from way back when, I didn't even honestly. I was just a little kid. But everywhere, whenever I went to a store that had motorsport stuff, you would see his stuff because he was Castrol. It's a lot like Jeff Gordon. Dale Earnhardt, and all that stuff. Yeah, you probably don't know them for real, but you know what they drive. For example, the Rainbow Warrior. Everybody remembers, like the old school NASCAR fans remember Jeff Gordon as the Rainbow Warrior. John Force, in my mind, is still, no doubt, the legend of drag racing. And even at over 70 years old, he's still kicking butt.
Oh, yeah, he's still behind the seat, and he's got his family doing it now, his daughter. He's got Robert Height, who I actually met in his rookie season. I will always say it, John Force is drag racing.
Definitely.
He's an old truck driver, grew up, didn't have a lot of stuff, but, he is one of the best, and, we'll see that as the 1990s go on, but, that concludes the first episode of Crush This Nitro Fueled. You know, we're still kind of getting our gear straight and how the shows are going to be formatted. But, you know, we wanted to get this recorded and kind of give you guys a little teaser of what's going to happen with this show. You know, I brought Dalton on after, you know, finding out our love of NHRA and especially the 1990s. You know, that's the era, like I said, that at the beginning that I know. That's the era that I grew up in, you know, being born in 91, that, you know, I watched as a little kid on TNN, you know, back in the day, like every Sunday I was in front of that TV waiting for NHRA to come on. Even the Penda series, you know, I'm a huge fan of that and that whole era of motorsports.
You couldn't get me away from the TV when TNN Motor Madness was on. I'm talking about like when it first came on in '97 to right after TNN dropped the Monster Jam stuff in 2002. Like, you could not get me away from that television set. You can ask anyone in my family. I don't know if at my grandfather's house if they're still there, but I have a whole bunch of tapes that are just TNN filled of either monster trucks, drag racing, because my dad used to collect those. Like, my dad got me into this stuff, and whenever I was a kid, I would always see something on either TNN or ABC, ESPN, no matter what. I was born in the mid-90s, I will admit that, but I feel like that the 90s were such a great time to live in because it was a time of change. Everything was changing from 1990 through, let's say, 94. You still had, like, your regular stuff that was coming from... You still had, like, your regular stuff coming in from, like, let's say, the 80s fashion were slowly going away by 94, and then by 95 to 99, we had this major climate change where everything was just rising. Everything was on the rise. NASCAR was on the rise. NHRA was on the rise. Monster trucks were on the rise. I hate to even bring this up, but wrestling was on the rise. I'm a major wrestling fan. You got guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock. They were on the rise. Everything was changing during the 90s to just what it is. Like, it's not what it's become today, but the 90s went through a major change. And, oh, boy, only to live through that time again.
Hey, we'll get into that a little bit about wrestling and drag racing because the two kind of partnered up in the early 2000s. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode. Like I said, we're still trying to figure out the kind of format we're doing. But my name is Bradshaw.
My name is Dalton Hastings, and I had a lot of fun here, man.
And this has been Crush This Nitro Fueled. As we always say with Crush This, keep the rubber side down and the shiny side up, everybody.